The prince who proposed to me was already married to my best friend's mother. Adekemi was 24 years old the night her best friend's mother walked into her engagement dinner wearing the same wedding ring as the man kneeling in front of her. Same ring, same inscription inside it. And when Adekemi turned to ask her fiancé what that meant, he wouldn't look her in the eye. If you want to know how a woman ends up engaged to a man who is already married to her best friend's own mother, and how deep this secret really goes, stay with me till the end because this story has more twists than you can count on both hands. And if you love stories that keep you guessing, hit that subscribe button now before we start because you do not want to miss what happens next. It started on a rainy Thursday in Ibadan, 3 years before that dinner. Adekemi was selling fabric in her aunt's shop on Dugbe Market Road when a black SUV pulled up outside, splashing muddy water onto her display of Ankara wrappers. She was furious. She marched outside, ready to curse whoever was inside that car, rich or not, prince or not, she didn't care. The window rolled down, a man's face appeared, calm, amused, unbothered by her anger. His name was Ademiran. He didn't look like trouble. He looked like the kind of man who smiled first and explained later, which should have been her first warning. He apologized, he paid for every wrapper that got stained, and then some. He asked for her name. She refused to give it. He laughed, said he'd find out anyway, and drove off. He did find out. Within a week, he was back at the shop, this time on foot, this time with an umbrella for her, as if he'd studied the Ibadan rain patterns just to have an excuse to see her again. Adekemi wasn't foolish. She'd heard the rumors. Rich men who came sniffing around market women rarely had honest intentions. But Ademiran was different. He asked questions. He remembered small details. He noticed when she was tired before she said a word. What Adekemi did not know, what nobody told her, was that Ademiran was not just a wealthy businessman as he claimed. He was the son of a powerful traditional ruler from a town 3 hours away, a town's name he never once mentioned in their first year together. He came to Ibadan under a different name in public spaces, introduced by people close to him simply as Mr. Ade, and only a handful of people knew his full identity. Adekemi thought she knew him. She had no idea she knew maybe 30% of the truth. Her best friend, Adebola, was the one who introduced skepticism into the relationship early. Adebola was sharp, always had been since their secondary school days at Queen's College. She didn't trust smooth-talking men, and she didn't trust how quickly Ademiran had become part of Adekemi's life. Ade, something about him doesn't add up, Adebola said one evening, sitting on Adekemi's bed while braiding her own hair. A man like that, with that kind of money, chasing a market girl for over a year, no family wahala, no baby mama drama, nothing. Men like that always have something hiding under the agbada. Adekemi laughed it off. Maybe I'm just the exception. Adebola didn't laugh. Nobody is the exception, Kemi. Everybody has a past. The question is whether he's going to let you see it before you marry into it. That conversation would come back to haunt both of them, though at the time, neither woman knew how tangled their futures already were. Adebola's mother, Madam Adeshola, was a well-respected woman in their community, known for her elegance, her sharp business mind, and the mysterious wealth she seemed to carry, despite claiming to be a simple widow running a small chain of provision stores. Adebola had grown up believing her father died when she was 6, a car accident, nothing more explained, nothing more asked. Madam Adeshola never remarried, never dated openly, never allowed any man near her daughter. She was, by all appearances, a woman who had closed that chapter of her life completely. Except she hadn't. 2 years into Adekemi and Ademiran's relationship, he proposed. It happened at a beach resort in Lekki. Candles everywhere, a live saxophonist, the whole cinematic package. Adekemi cried. She said yes before he finished the question. It was, by all accounts, the happiest night of her life. She called Adebola immediately, breathless, laughing, crying all at once. He proposed! Bola, he proposed! There was a pause on the line, a pause that lasted just a second too long. "Congratulations, Kemi," Adebola finally said, her voice strangely flat. Adekemi didn't notice it that night. She was too high on joy to notice anything. But if she had paid attention, she would have caught the tremor underneath her best friend's voice, the sound of someone trying very hard to sound happy while something inside them was quietly breaking. Before we go further, if this kind of layered drama is your kind of story, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part of this story is where everything starts to unravel. And trust me, you do not want to be scrolling past this when it happens. The engagement dinner was set 3 months later, a proper introductory ceremony where both families would formally meet. Adekemi had never met Ademiran's family, not once, in 2 years. Every time she asked, he had an excuse. His mother was traveling, his father was busy with chieftaincy matters, his siblings were abroad. Adekemi, blinded by love, accepted every excuse without pushing too hard, because pushing too hard felt like doubting him, and she didn't want to doubt him. Adebola, on the other hand, had grown quieter and quieter as the wedding plans progressed. She stopped returning calls as quickly. She found reasons to avoid dress fittings. She would show up to events looking like she hadn't slept, eyes red, as though she'd been crying before arriving and hiding it badly. Adekemi confronted her 2 weeks before the dinner. "Ade, what is wrong with you? Ever since I got engaged, you've been acting like somebody died. Are you not happy for me?" Adebola sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she held her cup of zobo. "Kemi, there are things I should have told you a long time ago. Things about my family, things about my mother." "What things?" Adebola opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then, like a woman losing her nerve at the very last second, she said, "Nothing, forget it. I'm just tired. Wedding planning is stressful, that's all." Adekemi let it go. She shouldn't have, but she did. The night of the engagement dinner arrived. The hall was decorated in gold and white. Adekemi's family sat proudly on one side. On the other side sat Ademiran's family, and this was the first time Adekemi would finally meet them. The first time in 2 years she would see the people who raised the man she loved. She noticed the tension in the room before she understood its source. Ademiran's father, a stern-looking chief in full traditional regalia, kept glancing toward the entrance as though expecting trouble. Ademiran himself looked pale, sweating despite the air conditioning, fidgeting with his cufflinks in a way she had never seen him do before. Then the doors opened and Madam Adeshola walked in. Adekemi smiled, relieved, thinking her best friend's mother had simply come to support her, as any family friend would. She waved her over warmly. "Auntie Adeshola, thank you for coming." But Madam Adeshola did not smile back. She stood frozen at the entrance, her eyes locked, not on Adekemi, but on Ademiran's father. And Ademiran's father was staring back at her with an expression of pure dread, the look of a man watching his worst nightmare materialize in real time. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Adebola, who had arrived earlier and was sitting quietly near the back, suddenly stood up, her face pale as chalk. "Mommy, what are you doing here?" Madam Adeshola ignored her daughter. She walked slowly, deliberately, toward the high table where Ademiran sat beside Adekemi. And as she got closer, everyone in that hall saw it, the thing that would blow the entire evening apart. On Madam Adeshola's left hand was a gold wedding ring, worn thin with age, the kind of ring that had clearly been on that finger for decades. And on Ademiran's hand, the same ring, matching, engraved with the same initials inside, initials that Adekemi had once asked about and been told belonged to her late grandmother. "You told me this ring belonged to your grandmother," Adekemi said slowly, standing up, her voice shaking. "Ademiran, why does Auntie Adeshola have the exact same ring?" Nobody answered. The silence in that hall was the loudest thing Adekemi had ever experienced in her life. Then Madame Adeshola spoke, her voice trembling but clear enough for the entire hall to hear. "Because I am his wife. I have been his wife for 26 years. If you are feeling that gut punch right now the way I did when I first heard this story, imagine being Adekemi in that room. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because what happens next in this story is something none of us saw coming. The hall erupted. Guests gasped, murmured. Some stood up in shock. Others reached for their phones as if to record the unfolding scandal. Adekemi's mother had to be held back by two relatives. Ademiran's father buried his face in his hands, and Ademiran himself sat frozen, unable to speak, unable to explain, unable to do anything except stare at the woman he had apparently been legally married to for over 2.5 decades while planning to marry Adekemi in front of everyone he knew. Adebola ran to her mother, grabbing her arm. "Mommy, what is going on? You told me my father died. You told me he died in an accident when I was 6. Madame Adeshola's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at her daughter. "Bola, my love, I never told you because the truth would have destroyed everything. Your real father died when you were young. Yes, that part was true, but he died before we could ever be together properly. I was left pregnant, unmarried, and trapped in a political marriage to a boy I barely knew. Ademiran and his family protected us. They gave you a name. They gave you legitimacy in a society that would have shredded us both otherwise." Adebola turned to Ademiran, her eyes wide with a mixture of grief and disbelief. "All these years, I thought you were just a family friend, someone my mother respected from her past business dealings. I never imagined you were legally her husband. I never imagined I was living a lie about my own existence." And now think about Adekemi in this moment, watching all of this unfold, realizing her fiancé had a secret so deep it had shaped the entire life of her best friend without either of them knowing. If you think this is where the story gets resolved, you are wrong, because there's still one more secret buried in this hall, one more twist that even Ademiran's own father did not see coming. Stick with me, because we are far from finished. Adekemi, through her tears, turned to Ademiran with a question that changed the entire direction of the night. If this marriage was fake, if it was just paper, why keep that ring? Why keep something so symbolic if it means nothing to you? Ademiran hesitated, and that hesitation told Adekemi everything before he even spoke. Because somewhere along the years, forced or not, Adeshola and I did develop something. Not romantic love, not in the way you and I have, but respect, loyalty, a bond built from surviving something neither of us chose. I never told you about the marriage because I convinced myself it wasn't really enough to matter. But I kept the ring because pretending it never happened felt like erasing the only person who understood the weight I carried since I was 14. Adekemi felt her heart shatter into pieces she didn't know existed. "So you loved me, but you never fully let go of her." "It's not like that," Ademiran said desperately. "Then what is it like, Ademiran? Because from where I'm standing, you asked me to marry you while still legally bound to another woman, a woman who happens to be the mother of my closest friend. Do you understand how insane this sounds?" Before Ademiran could respond, Adebola's voice cut through the chaos, calmer now, though her eyes were still wet. "There's something else you all need to know. Something my mother never told anyone, not even me, until 3 weeks ago." The room turned to her, stunned that there could possibly be more. "When I found out about the wedding invitation card, when I saw Ademiran's full name printed on it as the groom, I recognized it because I'd seen that exact name before on old documents in my mother's private box, documents I wasn't supposed to find. Marriage certificates, land agreements, and a letter written by my mother addressed to a lawyer dated 3 weeks before Kemi's introduction ceremony was even announced." Madame Adeshola's face went white. "Bola, please." "No, Mommy, everyone deserves the truth tonight, since we are already this deep." Adebola pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, the paper shaking in her hands. This is a copy of a petition my mother filed to formally dissolve the marriage 3 weeks before the introduction ceremony, which means, Ademiran, you knew, or at least strongly suspected, that the marriage was finally about to be legally ended, and instead of waiting those few weeks to marry Kemi as a free man, you proceeded with a public engagement while still technically bound to another woman. Why the rush? Why not just wait? This was the twist nobody in that hall expected, not even Ademiran's own father, whose face now showed genuine shock rather than the practiced composure of a man simply protecting old secrets. Ademiran's hands trembled because my father did not know about the dissolution petition. He believed the marriage was still politically necessary, that ending it would reopen the land dispute. If word got out that Adeshola was seeking dissolution, my father would have stopped it immediately to protect the family's interests. I planned to marry Kemi quietly first, secure our future together, and then deal with the legal technicalities afterwards, believing the paperwork would simply catch up eventually. You are going to commit bigamy, Adekemi said, hollow with disbelief, and hope nobody noticed until it was too late to undo. I was going to fix it, Ademiran insisted. I swear to you, Kemi, I was going to fix everything before it ever became a problem. Ademiran's father turned to his son with an expression of pure betrayal. You knew about the dissolution petition and said nothing to me? After everything I taught you about honor, about protecting this family's name, you were willing to risk a scandal this severe just to rush a wedding? I love her, Baba, Ademiran said, his voice breaking. I have loved Adekemi for 2 years in a way I never felt for anyone else in my life. I was terrified that if I told her the truth too early, she would leave before I had the chance to make things right. Adekemi shook her head slowly, tears falling freely now. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Instead, you let me plan a wedding, invite my family, prepare my hat, all while sitting on a secret this enormous. That's not love, Ademiran. That's control. That's deciding for me what I was allowed to know about my own future. We're getting close to the heart of this story now, and if you've made it this far, you already know this isn't your typical, predictable love story. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this all comes together, because the ending of this story is something you will not see coming. The hall remained tense, guests whispering among themselves, phones now openly recording despite the family's evident distress. Adekemi's mother finally stood, walking toward her daughter, wrapping her arms around her protectively. We are leaving, Adekemi's mother announced firmly. This engagement is over. My daughter will not be humiliated further in front of people who came here to celebrate a lie. But before Adekemi could be led away, Madam Adeshola stepped forward, blocking her path gently. Please, Adekemi, before you go, let me say one more thing. Not to defend him, not to defend myself, but because you deserve clarity, not just chaos. Adekemi, exhausted, nodded slightly, allowing the older woman to speak. I never wanted this marriage from the beginning, Madam Adeshola said. I was a teenage girl in love with a boy my family disapproved of, and I was punished for that love by being handed over to a stranger to save two families' pride. For 26 years, I built a life pretending to be a respectable widow, hiding a marriage that gave me nothing but a name and legal protection for my daughter. When I finally found the courage 3 months ago to file for dissolution, it was not because of your engagement. I didn't even know about your relationship with Ademiran until I saw the invitation card at Bola's house. I filed for dissolution because I finally wanted to reclaim my own life before I grew too old to matter to myself. She turned to Ademiran now, her expression softening slightly, despite everything. You should have told her the truth the moment you fell in love with her, Ademiran. You owed her that respect from the very beginning. Hiding this from both of us, allowing us both to walk into this hall unaware of each other, was cruel, whether you intended it that way or not. Ademiran lowered his head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Adebola, standing beside her mother, finally spoke to Adekemi directly, her voice thick with emotion. "Kemi, I need you to know something. I found those documents 3 weeks ago. I suspected something was deeply wrong, but I didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything you were excited about. I tried to warn you, remember? That night you called me about the proposal. I wanted to tell you then. I just didn't have the courage." Adekemi looked at her best friend, torn between anger at the silence and understanding of the impossible position Adebola had been placed in. "You should have told me, Bola. Whatever the consequences, you should have told me the truth." "I know," Adebola whispered, "and I will spend a long time trying to earn back your trust for staying quiet." The two women embraced, the tension between them dissolving into raw grief and shared pain, even as the deeper wounds of the evening remained unresolved. Adekemi turned to Ademiran one final time. Guests had begun quietly leaving the hall, sensing the celebration was truly over, but a few lingered, watching the final confrontation unfold. "I loved you," Adekemi said simply. "I believed every word you told me for 2 years, and now I don't know what was real and what was just you managing a situation you were too afraid to face honestly." "Everything was real, Adekemi. My love for you was never a lie." "Maybe not, but a love built on hidden truths isn't something I can build a marriage on. I need a man who trusts me enough to be honest, even when honesty is terrifying. You never gave me that chance." She removed the engagement ring slowly, placing it gently into his palm, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "I hope you and Auntie Adeshola find whatever peace you both deserve after everything you've sacrificed for each other's families. But I cannot be part of a story built on secrets this deep." She walked out of that hall with her mother, with Adebola beside her, leaving behind a stunned crowd, a broken engagement, and a family finally forced to confront decades of buried truth. In the weeks that followed, the story spread through their community like wildfire, though never quite the way others imagined. Madam Adeshola finalized her dissolution from Ademiran, finally free after 26 years of an arrangement she never chose. The land dispute that once threatened to tear two families apart had long since become irrelevant, the political tensions from decades earlier having faded into nothing more than old grudges nobody actively pursued anymore. The marriage, it turned out, had been maintained more out of habit and fear than any real necessity. Ademiran's father, humbled by the scandal, finally released his son from the burden of protecting a peace agreement that no longer needed protecting. Ademiran, for his part, spent months trying to reach out to Adekemi, sending letters, showing up outside her aunt's shop, apologizing in every way he could think of. Adekemi never fully closed the door on forgiveness, but she made it clear that trust, once broken this deeply, could not be rebuilt overnight, if it could be rebuilt at all. Adebola, meanwhile, finally learned the full story of her biological father, a man who had died young, deeply in love with her mother, unable to marry her due to the very family rivalry that had trapped Madam Adeshola in a marriage of convenience. For the first time in her life, Adebola finally understood the shape of her own origin story, painful as it was, and found a strange peace in finally knowing the truth rather than living inside a comfortable lie. Adekemi and Adebola's friendship, tested by silence and shaken by scandal, slowly healed over the following year. It wasn't instant. There were nights Adekemi still felt the sting of betrayal, moments she wondered what else her best friend might have hidden from her out of fear or misplaced protection. But love, real love, whether romantic or the deep loyalty between two women who had grown up together, has a way of surviving even the harshest storms, provided both people are willing to fight for it honestly. A year later, Adekemi met someone new, a quiet school teacher named Adewale, a man with no hidden marriages, no secret families, no complicated political alliances trailing behind him. Their relationship moved slower, built on transparency from the very first conversation. When he eventually proposed, there were no secrets buried beneath the surface, just two people choosing honesty over convenience. As for the prince who once proposed to her while legally married to her best friend's mother, Adekemi eventually forgave him, not for his sake, but for her own peace. Forgiveness, she learned, was not about excusing what he did. It was about refusing to let his secrets continue controlling her future. If this story taught you anything tonight, let it be this. Love without honesty is just a beautifully wrapped lie waiting to unravel at the worst possible moment. And sometimes, the people closest to us carry burdens so heavy, so tangled in old wounds, that the truth takes decades to surface, no matter how much we think we already know them. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you're subscribed, because there are so many more stories like this waiting for you. Stories about love, betrayal, family secrets, and the moments that change everything we thought we knew. Drop a comment below telling me what part of this story shocked you the most, and if you believe Adekemi was right to walk away, or if you think love like that deserves a second chance. Until the next story, take care of your heart, and never be afraid to ask the hard questions, because sometimes the truth, however painful, is the only thing that can truly set you free.